Hello, we're here. Nice to see you all here. Welcome back. We're here April 24th, our 6th live stream, I think.
23rd.
Oh. I know what
it is the 23rd.
Happy Saturday, everybody.
It was Thursday. I almost said happy Wednesday because we were doing these Wednesday first, so at least you had the day of the week down.
Yeah.
Oh my God, good.
Yeah, and Shay's here. Social distancing.
Yes, here on the screen.
Awesome.
Floating iPad.
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. I think there's some new people that are joining us and some people that have always joined us. So hello again. Awesome. So do you want to start with numbers? We were just talking about some things to talk about. And Shay, did you have numbers? We can also pull it up too if you don't have it.
Yeah, I'll have them in just a second here. I thought I had it already pulled up, but okay. So the Orange County reported numbers from the Public Health Department today. Let's see, was this updated? Yep, it's already been updated for today. So our total count for Orange County so far is at 1,827, and there have been 36 deaths in Orange County at this point. In the last 24 hours, there were 78 new cases reported and 2 deaths in the last day. So there's currently 158 patients hospitalized with COVID and 59 patients in the ICU. So that's where we're at. It's on April 23rd.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at the website now. And one of the interesting things that we've always...
They can see it from Shay's view too.
Oh yeah, look at that. But yeah, just the overall trend, right? What are the important numbers to kind of think about and look at? And one of the trends is the hospitalization rate, ICU management or ICU utilization, and where is that trending? Overall, I mean, clearly our numbers are smaller than other localities. Having said that as well, you know, our resources haven't been stretched, which is good. It hasn't hit the limits of what we're preparing for. Compared to yesterday already, there's a small decrease in hospitalizations and ICU admissions, not admissions, but ICU hospitalizations. So once again, all somewhat favorable numbers. One of the numbers that I believe the website doesn't address, and Emily was asking about earlier, was the new admissions per day, which is different than the total hospitalization. So that's an interesting number to kind of think about how many new people are admitted every day to the hospital and discharged. Right now, the numbers that are out to the public that are easy to obtain are really just the totals, which does have value, so which is still a good thing to see, but it's still a little unclear as to how many new people are being hospitalized and how many people are being discharged. But once again, still overall good numbers to see overall, unless you guys have any other opinions on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. So yeah. So that's that. And the things we wanted to talk about today, and I kind of put like clickbait, I guess is the term you call, like the title, right? Are we ready to reopen? I think are we ready to reopen? And I think there's a lot of buzz and a lot of news out there asking that question. There's a lot of media push highlighting various types of groups really being adamant about reopening and what this looks like next. So that's a thing we kind of wanted to address today. And there's a lot of overlap with antibody testing and what that means, which we've talked about at length before, but we can revisit that because I think it's a really important topic to kind of discuss a little bit more. So on that note, we've just to update, I think, so I don't think we've updated since the antibody testing, have we? Since the last live stream? So we did.
No.
Yeah.
No, we hadn't gone live yet. We did last Tuesday. So
right. So
we did the update.
So we did 22 antibody tests, which is, as you can imagine, incredibly small number of people doing antibody tests in our practice, and they've all been negative. Everybody who has done the test was concerned about possible exposure in the past with some flu-like or cold symptoms over the past few months. And once again, an incredibly small number of samples to draw any conclusions from, except for that they were all negative from this particular time. we did test, I believe, 49 more.
43.
43 more yesterday, and I just got really preliminary looked at today. So everybody who's watching, your results are back. What I've seen so far is I think almost all of them are negative. Once again, we will message you those details later today. But that kind of lines up really what we would expect. And so this we can talk about prevalence, what that means, and new studies that are being kind of blasted through the internet about Santa Clara and LA County showing the headline is that 50x more than what we had expected in terms of prevalence of disease and what that truly means. But if you assume, let's say, the Santa Clara study, their assumption was based on their preliminary data, 2.8 to I believe 5% prevalence. That means if I test 100 people, I would expect maybe 2 to 5 people test positive for antibodies. And we haven't even tested 100 people yet. So it actually makes sense that we have 0 positives. So that still correlates. And once again, these numbers are way too small to get true information from, but it is kind of interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Someone was asking about the reliability of the lab. Ryan was asking that. Last week when we were talking about this, we were confusing things a bit, probably because we were talking about this point of care test along with the blood tests that we send to the lab. So after our last live stream, we 2 hours afterwards, we got a notice that the point of care test that we had ordered really couldn't be administered at a physician's office anyway. And that was the one we were questioning. So we just canceled that order and decided not to pursue that at all at this point. It's possible with time that we'll have more reliability of those. And the point of care is you get a finger stick and a result in 15 minutes. What we're doing now is a blood draw and sending it off to a lab. And that we do think is very reliable. We've been vetting what this lab has done, and we have every reason to trust that their results are as accurate as they say based on their internal evaluation of their test, which they've said it's 99.4, was it 99.4% specificity?
Which the Genolite lab?
Yeah.
Higher than 99%. I don't remember the exact percentage.
Meaning that a false positive would be very unlikely according to how they validated it within their lab. But what we've been telling everybody, is that we don't really know the true accuracy of a test until it's put out and in the world, and we have external validation of it. So more of a sense of what's going on out there with the test. So that's sort of a caveat. Again, we trust the lab we're working with. We're still not putting all of our eggs in one basket with these results, or I don't know if that's the right analogy, but we're not really saying these results are so definitive right now because we have to see how things go as we get more information outside of the lab's internal validation.
And just to say, I think that's in line with really where the medical community is at with antibody testing in general. We're not, I don't know of anyone that's at the point yet where they're, at the policy level saying, let's start using this test is good enough and it's validated. Let's go ahead and start using this antibody testing to then start making decisions about behavior change and to start lifting restrictions and start doing clearances. And so the medical community isn't there yet. We're not quite there yet. And all of you that have had antibody testing, we've had these conversations with you that we're just not there where we're, it's clear enough how to interpret these results and how validated the test is that we can for sure say that even if it were positive, which it's difficult to get a positive on the way the testing algorithm has been set up, which is a good thing. Even if it were positive, we're not going to tell you, go ahead and take that mask off and go back to work and, you're fine, you're immune. We're just not there. So just to reiterate that point, and we're, studies are being done. We're getting there. I know everybody wants this information and really wants the green light or some kind of movement towards a green light to go back to normalcy. There's progress being made, but our small practice, as well as the Orange County, as well as the state of California, we're not. We're early in the antibody testing, and we're getting there, and that's why we're keeping you posted. Anything to add to that, James and Emily?
On that note, I think one of the things that is out there is, the whole purpose of the antibody test, which is definitely um, uh, debatable in terms of its use. And one of the interesting things, if you just step back a minute and think, let's say the prevalence of disease, which is how much of it has been there circulating. Let's say it's 2%, 2 out of 100 people have antibodies based on, once again, assuming that some of these studies are accurate. That leaves the use of proposed immunity cards and all of these things to get back open kind of useless, really, right? I mean, if it's at that level, it would be hard to use these tests at this time. I'm not saying forever, but really on a public policy level. And once again, every day is different, and we can have a different conversation in a few weeks where we have more data where we can make more actionable decisions. But as of today, these numbers that are being suggested and not yet verified by the studies that are out there and what we're seeing in our tiny microscopic sample isn't anywhere to move the needle to say like, oh yes, we have immunity, we don't. It suggests that there just isn't as much prevalence, and so therefore, once again, it doesn't change anything acutely in how we are doing things on a day-to-day. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing we all want to see from the antibody test is how prevalent is it really? And those are the questions that have really come up lately, and there's so much controversy about this, I think. And I honestly don't know what to think. I think we've had 2 studies, and maybe more than that, but 2 that I've been looking at, where they went and they tested everybody with the antibody test, and they said, the amount of people that have had this are much higher than we think. And the problem with those studies is they're using the same antibody tests that we are. So, I mean, I say not specifically, but we would assume that there's a similar question about external validation with these tests. And so it's a little bit of a jump to then say very clearly that this is the truth. So it's tricky. And we've seen both the study that was done at USC and the study that was done up in Santa Clara have both shown that there's more antibodies in the community than the estimated rate of people who had COVID. And we all kind of know that a little bit because we all know not everybody's getting tested. I mean, we've had plenty of people in our practice who we really think probably have COVID and they haven't come in for a test and they're not getting counted in the numbers. So, but there's.
And we know that, general testing got rolled out so late too. So that's.
Right.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that there are more people who have been exposed to this than the numbers show right now. But it's difficult to say specifically with the numbers that they're stating, is that the truth? Is it really, the range was like 28 times to 50 times with a USC study, and then 50 to 85 times more prevalent or more people have it than we are stating. And I don't know, I don't think we can really say that either of those things are the exact range or number, and we can count on that, and we should plan for everything based on that at this point, because there's a lot of flaws in the study. And this is how science works. We have to start with our best attempt to gather data, and then papers get peer reviewed, people pull it apart, and then someone else designs a more well-designed study so that we can get more detail on it. So I think what I'm taking from all this is it's probably out there more than we think. I don't trust that it's as bad. I don't really trust that it's 100% exactly the numbers that they're saying on these studies. And I'm really curious to see, as we get more and more data, how if more and more people replicate this and it's consistently showing a certain range of, this many times more people, then I might start to trust it more, right?
Yeah.
I think the tricky thing about interpreting these studies in general, and we've all 3 been talking about this a little bit. I mean, at this point, understandably, everyone, us included, I'm ready to not be on lockdown with my toddlers anymore. Like, many are in much more dire situations than that. I completely sympathize and understand that everyone is hungry for any piece, any shred of something that's going to tell us, maybe COVID isn't as fatal as we thought it was. Maybe it's been here for a long time. Maybe we can all go back to work next week. in general, with it, and so everybody in our society is so hungry for that. And then a study gets done, and then it gets catapulted into like mainstream media through the natural process that these scientific studies usually go through of rigorous peer review, and really, rigorous scientific interpretation of how the study's been done. And that's kind of what's happening right now. So we just need to, kind of give things a little time, let the scientific community filter through that data. I think, for me, I myself need to look further into the Stanford study and the USC study, but in general, I'm just going to be very, with the implications of taking a study that's very early on and then, using that to open things up or to make potentially really risky decisions in this disease that does seem to be so fatal. The implications of not jumping to conclusions too soon are just so grave that we want to be careful, and we want to make sure we're doing that well and rigorously, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. We've discussed this, and part of our criticism of just the culture of where we live and news in general, and this has been going on forever, so it actually isn't a new phenomenon, but in this heightened sense of anxiety, it is important to step back and understand news cycles will pick studies that actually sound either good or bad in the results portion of a study. And whether it's from one of the biggest things, the most important thing of any study is never the result, it's always the methodology. And so this, from a scientific perspective, really has to be understood. And it isn't something that's easily understood by us, let alone everybody in the community. For us in the scientific community to really understand what the methodology is and to understand the flaws and limitations is the most important thing of a study, not the results. If the methodology is sound, then you can put the results into context and what it might mean and how to improve on it, like Emily said. So stepping back a little bit, we clip all these highlights of what the results are. And I do this as well because I'm like everybody else. I read a result and it's interesting and I want to read about it. But if you really read into it, none of these results have been peer reviewed. And you start digging into it, like there's a lot of flaws. And so what are those flaws and how does that actually change the results that's being reported? It might actually be true, but we really need to temper our enthusiasm and our hunger and craving for news that we want to hear. And that's also the biases that we're also facing in the scientific community as we move forward is like, we're designing studies to get a result, which is not the scientific way, right? So to be truly objective, you really want to make sure you're studying things open to the possibility that you don't know what the results are. And we're not at that place right now. And it's once again, a very cultural thing that we're going through. So stepping back and understanding that is just really key to managing what we ingest with this fire hose of information and how to interpret that and with a healthy dose of skepticism, which we all should have on both sides. So I wanted to make that a pretty clear point.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, there's a couple questions. Should we go to that unless there's something else you guys wanted to?
No, I think there was some questions just on kind of and if the screen is shaking a lot when James touches the computer, we're sorry.
It's not an earthquake. It could be an earthquake.
People were asking about plasma donation and antibodies, and I don't know a lot about this. So my understanding is,
I mean, for a very low, who's UCI faculty, and I just emailed the doctor head of the blood bank at UCI to see if that's happening yet, if they're accepting donations of we call it convalescent plasma, so someone who's tested positive for COVID and then could donate. We would expect them to have antibodies that could then potentially help someone who's currently infected with the virus. And he said they're not right now. UCI isn't doing that. They are Red Cross. If you just go through the Red Cross, so you can look up their website, they are taking those donations. It's not for sure, it's not certain how those will be used but if you're COVID positive and you're interested in that and you want to donate blood, I contact the Red Cross for now. UCI is actively working on a study to start doing that. Last week, he said, I'll have more information on that next week. So I'll let you know if I hear anything from UCI particularly. We haven't heard any updates on that yet. But I don't know if that's kind of more specific. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I think it's what I've read. It's in trial basis. It sounds promising, but once again, it's in this research phase of, is it beneficial, and if so, how do you operationalize that, and finding the right donors and et cetera. So I still think, like Shay mentioned, contacting the blood bank, just seeing what their protocol is. Are they involved in any type of research? I'm not aware of. I haven't done any research on that, but it sounds like UCI is in the process of getting that set up. So
in the process of getting that organized, yeah.
And someone had asked if we've had any positive antibody tests, because we said most were negative. The reason we said most were negative is because we haven't reviewed them all yet. So They might all be negative. So hang in there. They were starting to come in right before we started.
Right before we started, I just started clicking on names and reports, and they all so far that I've clicked through.
Who will be getting antibody testing, I think it's taking about 2 days, right? Like those are Tuesday's tests that are just coming back as of this, like right before we came on, we were just getting results back from Tuesday's tests, right?
Well, the reason I actually hand delivered them again. I drove down to San Diego. I hand delivered them yesterday at like 2 p.m. and it's less than 24 hours this time. So it looks like
just Wednesday's tests. Oh.
They're both
Tuesday
and
Wednesday.
All of them, because we couldn't get it there till yesterday.
So I delivered them yesterday, all of them.
You delivered Tuesday and Wednesdays. I'm sorry.
Yes, okay. So I think they're almost all back. So. So yes, the answer to that question is I haven't officially reviewed all of them, but I did go through most of them, and it seems that all are still negative.
And those of you who've been sick had a swab. The swab was negative. I know Max was asking about that here. And then kind of, well, could there be a false negative with my swab? Should I then get an antibody test? I would say, yeah, why not? If you're curious about seeing that. I would say you wait a month though, because we don't want to see is you do it too soon. If you do it a week or 2 weeks later and it's negative, we're going to say, well, maybe you haven't had time yet. Let's give it another 2 weeks. And now we're all spinning our wheels. So I would say, Max, wait on that. And then of course, if you're really sick and you're, having trouble breathing and you've had a negative swab, then you need to follow up with us on what's going on, because it could be that you do have COVID and we didn't catch it on the swab, or you do have an alternative diagnosis. So yeah, get in touch with us. But if you're having mild symptoms that are improving, it's always possible to have other viral illnesses. They're still circulating out there. So.
And one question was, have we tested anyone for antibodies that had tested positive for COVID? And the answer is yes. The one limitation of that test was that it was actually the antibody test was done in the window when the antibodies have a reasonable chance of still being negative. And so that test was negative antibody test. So I have to figure out a way of doing screen shares and all that in the future. But basically, there's this trough of, a time where with a positive nasal swab, there's still, up to 7 days and maybe even a little bit more before you start seeing any antibodies actually mount. And so just like Emily said, if we really want to see a long-term antibody response, we should consider doing it later, like a month later after your symptoms. So so that's it on that. That's the one that we've tested.
That's part of what's making us say at least 4 weeks since the onset of your symptoms. That particular patient was 2 weeks out from the onset of her symptoms. It was negative. It was very strange and unexpected, but we're going to repeat it and we'll see.
Yeah. There's a good question, which is, the title of this whole thing, like what would we want to see to start reopening, right? So that's a really great question. But we've talked about this because really at this point in time, it's a standstill, right? I mean, we're all here, we're all doing our parts, dutifully so, in terms of keeping ourselves quarantined, and we've shut down the economy, and clearly there's huge ramifications for that. So what's the next step? So there's clear guidelines that from the federal, states, and local level that people are trying to figure out what needs to be seen in order to start opening the economy and businesses. One of the things in Newsom's 6-point strategy that he unveiled last week was really, a sustained decrease in overall cases and mortality. There's a need really of sufficient testing and the resources available to make sure when we do open up, we want to be able to test people if people start having symptoms again, and if hospitalizations start to increase, we need to be able to get them in to see us, all right, to see you guys, and be able to be agile in figuring out, okay, this is popping up again. We need to do X, Y, and Z. So those resources really need to be in place in the setting of a stable and or decreasing trend of cases, deaths, hospitalization use, and to target then to start targeting reopening in certain sectors. And I'm not a public policy person, so I'm not going to pretend I understand how to make this happen. That's a very challenging job, to say the least. But those are the conversations that need to be had in terms of saying we have enough resources to handle. If we open up, these are the things we are going to do, and feel reassured that you guys can start engaging in the community again. And so that's a really big task. And testing is one part of the puzzle, but there are clearly other pieces that need to be put into place.
This is the thing I'm going to try this. This is probably going to be dumb. But this graph, to me, is one of the more important things for us to look at as far as when can we go back. What this is showing is the number of deaths per day. Is it backwards?
Yeah.
Anyway, so you guys can find this on health data, covidhealthdata.org. But what it shows is the number of people that are dying per day. And so that gives, to me, that's a very good sense because, yes, there might be underreports of the number of people dying. Like people were dying in their homes in New York, but this is for the state of California. It's not for Orange County, but what this graph shows was that on April 18th, it peaked at 103 deaths per day. And then on April 19th, it went this big drop down to 37, then kind of came back up. And now we're at 59 deaths per day. So it seems like this peak of 103 deaths per day on the 18th of April. And now we've sort of had this little bit of a downward trend. And if we can continue to see this downward trend, and this is saying after May 18th, then social distancing relaxation could be possible in California based on this projection on this website. But this is what I really am looking at, is the number of deaths per day, because I feel like this is the most accurate thing that we have right now as far as tracing how rampant this is in our community. And there is some sign of a trend that's starting to go down. And I'm just going to put it up one more time. The thing that's tricky is it's doing this seesaw kind of thing, right? So the dotted line on there is the projection of the future. But the dark line, it's doing this up and down thing. So, but it seems to be kind of like doing this downward. I don't know if it's going to come back up to 103. And it seems like, it won't, but and so if we can watch that just for a bit longer, how many days are we going to watch it? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? They're saying till May 18th. But that's the number I'm watching to see. And of course, we're not setting policy, but just kind of having that sense of when does it make sense? I'm looking at this.
And also too, I think the important thing too is the focus on locality, right? So clearly we're in a different place than New York. And clearly we're at this point, we're different than LA County, which is our neighbor. And so, if we have the resources to be able to monitor this aggressively, then we would have the ability to be able to open and close easily. And that's the ideal state. And so I don't know where we're at with that on a resource level. That would be something to ask our higher ups clear in the community in terms of what are we capable of doing. But I have to trust that they do understand that, and they have to make these educational guesses based on the resources we currently have and expect to have in the future. And that's the best we can do, because like a lot of you know, we can't do this forever. This is not a permanent state.
I think the other tricky piece of that, though, kind of the flip side of what James is saying about locality, is that we are also interconnected. I mean, even if we were to more rapidly be able to build public health infrastructure here in Orange County, and it does look like in Orange County we have been, maybe because of the way we're more distant and not as dense as LA, maybe because of the social distancing we started early, probably a mix of all of the above, but our hospitals are not overwhelmed here in Orange County. It does seem like we've kind of successfully flattened this curve. There are parts of LA County, that are seeing more of a surge in their hospitals. There are parts in San Diego that are seeing more of a surge in their hospitals. And it's tricky even if we were to, have the public contact tracing and robust testing and all of those things that would make more sense for us to be open, I think we also need to take into consideration the impact that that's going to have on our surrounding counties, even on surrounding states. I mean, it's a tough balance. Everybody's not going to be all on the same page at the same time, but I think those are the tough decisions that policymakers are considering right now, and definitely that Governor Newsom is considering. If we open up here and then everybody's just coming down from LA and coming up from San Diego to come to our restaurants and use our beaches because they're desperate to do that, which makes sense. But then they're bringing it back home, or bringing it even across state lines. There's this balance of this is such a time in society where we all really need to understand how much our actions affect other people and understand, just how we need to take care of each other. But it's also, so it's just tricky. I think that also is a piece of what the policymakers are considering right now.
I agree 100%. I think, yes, we are all interconnected. We don't live in silos. And then, that is going to affect everybody else, right? So we open up, that's going to affect LA and San Diego. And if people start traveling again, which at some point we are, how is that going to affect our surrounding communities and communities afar? So these are, once again, really challenging questions in terms of policy and how do we track and make this a safe place again, and we're going to do it. It's just it's a challenging thing for sure.
So what do you guys think about this idea of herd immunity? Some people are talking about the economic damage from this far exceeds the benefit of the isolation, and that we should open everything up and we should all get herd immunity, and then this will be over quick and we'll all be good.
So what's herd immunity, I guess?
That?
Yeah. So what's herd immunity, I guess, is the next question I have. Like, can you elaborate on that?
I'm going to let you elaborate on that.
You elaborate on that. You brought it up.
Well, I think what people are referring
Thanks, Shay.
to that is just like, go ahead. It's like the chickenpox thing you do with your kids. Like, just let everybody be exposed to it. And it's, let's all just go out there. And if you're sick, I'll sit in the same room and let's all just, face it and get it. And whoever dies, and survival of the fittest, I guess. And,
or this sort of,
and then we all have antibodies, and then we can move on, and then this will become more like the flu because it's not this new thing that we haven't all been exposed to. So there's going to be a lot more protection out there in society, the more people that have been exposed to it. That's one way of developing immunity other than having a vaccine. It's just if everybody gets exposed and then you build antibodies. So you can probably tell from the way I was describing that I have some issues with that, with whoever dies. And, that's what I think is the problem with that. It's, are we going to is it okay with all of us, for the most vulnerable in our society, for, those with the least healthcare access, for those with other, with many chronic diseases, comorbidities due to circumstances out of their control from the time they were children. And, are we going to just say, because those are the people who are going to be affected. And those are the people who are going to die completely disproportionately. And I'm not good with that. So that's my response to that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I guess the other question is, what about the idea of that the economic impact of this on all the people in general far exceeds, that's kind of, these are the things that are being because of these studies that have been done, the projection is that maybe it's more out there in the community, and thus the death rate isn't as high. And so then we should because of that, then we should not be as scared, and we should go out and, do this, and because the economic impact is worse. So what do you think about that?
Well, the counter argument clearly is that if you are careless about or reckless about public health and opening our economy back up, the death toll, not even the death toll, but utilization toll, actually also impacts the economy in a bad way. So it's that fine balance of, clearly doing public good on from a health perspective, and the economy and mental health, which we'll talk about, I'm sure too, is clearly currently what we're living through already, not just on a health perspective, but from the economy, with people are unemployed, not getting paid. I mean, these are real big things that we need to address. But similarly, if we are reckless and there's just more deaths and more hospitalizations, then clearly that will also take a negative toll in addition to everything else. So from that perspective, I think just feeling like just let's pull the Band-Aid and get it over with is a little too short-sighted in terms of its overall effect. And I agree with Shay in a sense that what we're seeing is there's been a great amount of inequality throughout our country, and this is also bringing that to light. And so who are the people who are most vulnerable? Once again, people who are disadvantaged, whether economically, socioeconomically, all these things, and we don't have the resources to deal with that. And so I think there's graver things. So stepping back, I think Emily is kind of alluding to is that this notion that at some point we are going to have to open up, and once we do open up, we are going to see more people with this and a sense of increased exposure and immunity over time. This slow burn, if you will. And it's what we would hope is a controlled slow burn where we are in control. And this is where I think the whole notion of not living in fear actually is a real thing, where, we're inundated with all of this negative news and fear. And, we should hopefully feel empowered by our systems that are in place, that we have the resources, that when we do go back into the workplace, into society, that we will be taken care of in terms of testing, healthcare, all of these things, going back, having our jobs again. So once again, that's the job of our leaders. And I hope that's something that they're able to live up to.
One of the things that seems very clear to me is that the economic impact of not doing this, I truly believe, would have been more devastating. So what we've done so far, and particularly in California, this amazing work that's been done by our community by protecting everybody, I think has really saved us from a pretty horrible economic devastation. And from what I understand about pandemics, which we don't have a lot of models to look at, but generally when they pass, the economy comes right back because the problem that created the economic downturn has thus resolved. So I think, there is something to be said for the value of life. Not losing life actually saves a lot of money. So I think we have to remember that too. And so, although it's like what James and I were trying to think of an analogy, but it's like you can't really see the benefit of preventive health because you don't know what it would have looked like if you ate crappy food every day forever. You don't know the heart attack you didn't have. You don't know the stroke you didn't have. So, can you, with this, maybe people now it's like, it's easy to be like, well, this is horrible, this economic devastation. And it is. My understanding from what I've read and how I've interpreted things is, had we not done this and lost a lot of life very quickly, or if we move too quickly and lose a lot of life very quickly, that devastation will be much greater. But it's really interesting, and I think people are asking, how do we know about, like, what does herd immunity really mean? Are you going to be protected anyway? Like, how long are you going to be protected? My mom is asking. I told her to ask good questions because she's smart and asks good questions. How long are you going to be protected by these antibodies? We don't know. So right. So what does that even really mean? And there's that balance. We do need to push a little bit. And there was a great article and by this gentleman who was talking about this idea of the hammer and the dance. And so you start with the hammer, which is what we've been up against, and it feels like a hammer, like shut it down, and we're all just doing everything so extreme. And now we're sort of entering this phase of the dance, right, where we open up the valve for a little bit. We open up golf courses, we open up beach access, and then we see the numbers start to tick up, and then we close it down and we see what happens. And we kind of have to live with this for a while as we are. And the slower we can take it, like James was saying, maybe that'll give us a chance to understand this more and learn more about treatments and learn more about, do we need to give hydroxychloroquine to people or not? I mean, it's like, is that the right thing or not? And if it came too fast, we wouldn't know. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the answer to that.
And then the vaccine. So can we talk about the vaccine? Because I think a lot of people have questions about that, and people are asking, when's the vaccine coming, and what does it even really mean? How well is it going to work? And so I don't know if you guys want to talk about.
Well, the quickest to date, as far as I recall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is to date is a 4-year lead time for vaccine development. So it's what we're looking right now is optimistically 12 months. Everybody is being tasked to develop and clinically validate vaccines. The other issue, not only with figuring out the efficacy and side effect profile of vaccines, is actually deployment of the vaccine. So, from an economic perspective, you have a lot of companies who are going to try to create the vaccine that works. Most of them will fail, but in parallel, all of them will have to invest an incredible amount of money to be able to deploy if their vaccine is successful. And so what you're going to have is just a lot of resources put into it and a lot of questions about if there's all the right incentives to push this through. Is this the right vaccine, and the side effect profile, and are we being cautious enough that if this is the right thing for us? So that's the rough, like, high level timeline, and clearly none of us have an answer as to when we can expect a vaccine, but it's definitely not next month, and it's not any time in the near future, in a sense of even a few months. So that's in development, and that's clearly on everybody's top mind, because really at this point, herd immunity and vaccinations are the only really things that are going to make this a far more widespread I guess immunity.
Back to normalcy.
Yeah, somewhat back to normalcy, and
right.
Even that term is questionable, because what does that mean?
Right.
And we could talk about the economy and all of these other topics which are beyond the scope of this. But I think, yeah.
Right, and I think you hear these ranges of maybe there'll be a vaccine by April next year and it'll work great and we'll be able to just be, and the economy will recover and it'll be this V-shaped thing. And that's possible. Then there's the story of vaccines can take 4 years to develop. The SARS related types of vaccines that have been tried to be produced in the past actually have had an opposite reaction, which is really scary, where people got the vaccine and then it made them actually more susceptible to the illness. So yeah, it's possible that it may take longer. So it's challenging with this. There's that huge range of what could happen. And I was talking to a friend yesterday about when are they going to open the schools, and are they going to open the schools in the fall? I mean, we know the schools are out for this year, but are they going to open them in September? And trying to make these conclusions now just seems insane. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen before September. Maybe we'll have really more clarity on this antibody test and contact tracing. Maybe our public health department will step it up and we'll be great at contact tracing and isolating people and testing, and maybe they will open the schools. Or maybe, people are asking about the heat wave. Maybe the summer heat will bring it down and everything's going to be better, or maybe not. And so we can't decide until we get there. And that's the tricky thing, is this waiting. It's very tricky.
Yeah, and part of our goal of having this too is hopefully provide, I know we sound wishy-washy sometimes, but that's the truth. And there isn't much that we can really hang our hat on definitively. So hopefully, in a sense, that provides a little bit of, instead of this anxiety of like, is this the right thing, or do we know these things or not? And we just don't know. And so, we're getting there, and just understanding the methodology behind it. It seems chaotic, and in a lot of ways it is, but we're really, there is actually a simplicity and clarity in this if you take the time to find it, and we're actually there, right? And it's frustrating to be in simplicity and clarity sometimes because it's sometimes not where you want to be, right? So, but that's what we have, right? We're at home, the economy's closed. We are now in the process of opening it up again, and seeing where that goes. And once, like Emily alluded to, I don't know what that's going to look like in a month, but I think we need to plan for that, and we have the luxury of being able to do that in certain respects. So, as long as we can organize ourselves in a way, then we should be fine.
And here again, I keep doing this, but here's the projection, right? I mean, if the deaths per day can start to go down to next to nothing, and then we have this containment strategy, I mean, you're looking at a summer where nobody's dying from COVID, and that's pretty cool. And they're saying May 18th on this website. So what if, right? We can be a little more open. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and I think that is imminent. From my opinion, all of these strategies are imminent. There is a need to open things up again, and so we are once again part of the process, and we'll see where it goes.
Thanks for all the support out there.
Yeah, from Australia.
Oh, nice.
What do you guys think about the heat killing the virus? What do you guys? I mean, I guess we're going to give a lot of I don't knows again.
It's not conclusive. I think if you look at some of the studies, it isn't this clear. Thank goodness it's hot now. From what we've seen in warmer Asian climates, it isn't zero. Like there's still prevalence of disease, so it may slow down. So, but it's not something where we are changing our preparation or changing our resources. Anticipating that it's going to get better because of the heat. In fact, we should plan the opposite, meaning we should prepare that it doesn't work so that when we do open things up again, we are able to handle all of that situation that arises from that. So I'm not in a mindset
Isn't there clarity that UV light does destroy the virus?
It's actually, so we talked about this, I think about maybe the first live stream, the actual viral molecule is really weak. It's not a strong little guy or girl or whatever thing you want to call it.
But I think we did talk about in one of those very early first or second live streams, you were saying, I wouldn't trust, those like heat phone sanitizers, or we just don't know. I actually think now, it does seem like extreme heat or UV light, because we are seeing that it is more, it's a pretty easy to kill virus, pretty easy to disrupt. So I need to, I don't know if you guys have seen definitive studies, but I would be, I'm more apt now at this point to think that UV light would kill it than I was when I said in the first one or two live streams, like, don't trust that.
Right. But I guess I asked because my thought is it's getting to be summertime, and if we're outside and somebody is, a certain degree away from us, and there's wind and there's sun, and it just seems like it's a little less risk when we're outside. I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but
I don't know if I can conclude anything from that. It sounds good, but it doesn't mean like being at the beach would prevent you from getting
right.
That's a little slippery.
That's not what I'm trying to say.
I think in general the thought with viruses and why respiratory stuff spikes in colder weather is just the people being closer to each other. I don't think I don't think the thought is that it necessarily has to do with the weather outside is killing the virus in the summer, but it's more, in the summer people are spending more time outside. Everybody's not like in enclosed buildings in closer contact with each other. Just things are less transmissible in the summer because we're not all inside our houses. I think that's the general viral theory and what's been studied. It's a little tricky in a place like the lovely place where we live, where it's 70 degrees all year round. But I think that's why our patterns often look a little different, and the East Coast flu starts, our patterns of when flu peaks are a little bit different here and a little more spread out because our weather isn't as extreme. But I think the general thought is the weather thing increases or decreases how much time people are spending together and transmission, less so than the weather actually killing the virus.
I don't know how many of you guys are watching the chat, but we have Dr. Saxena from Australia. And she was saying in the summer in Australia, which is nice because they're opposite of us, they were actually still seeing exponential growth before they put in social distancing. So there's that.
Mhm.
But so I don't know. We'll see what happens.
We'll
I'm just going
see.
to keep looking at this curve that says that the deaths are going to go down here in the
Gee,
summer, and
that's
I'm
good.
hoping
I
this
would like to
projection
look-
is true.
I'd like to look towards that.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk briefly. I don't know if there's more questions. I can't really see the questions coming in, but
No,
maybe
you're
we
good.
could talk briefly. I feel like it's been a bit of doom and gloom and uncertainty in terms of big policy. When are things institutionally going to open back up? But Emily and I were just starting to have a little conversation right before the webinar about more locally, like within our families. Like, does it, at the point that we're at in Orange County, where hospitalizations and ICU admissions aren't skyrocketing, we seem kind of leveling off. Does it make sense to start seeing our grandparents? I don't know that I have a clear answer to that, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think maybe is that something you guys have been thinking about, or
We have all the answers.
is that your mind? I think it's like I said, I don't know that I have clear answers to it, but I'm starting to shift. Again, just personally, starting to shift into the mindset of. I think we were all in like emergency phase for a while. Like, this is going to be for a month or so. And so we're just going to, figure out life routines, and it's not going to be forever. But now we're starting to, okay, this is going to be maybe until June, July, August, September. Like, we've got to start, moving forward while being safe.
Right.
And taking a more long-term view.
Right.
So,
and it's a good question.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the questions actually that somebody had written in earlier about, they are in their 60s and they have grandkids.
Right.
Their grandkids are 2, 4, and 5. And, can I hang out with my grandkids now if I wear a mask? And, that's the $1 million question for a lot of people. We just had this conversation last night between the two of us, At this point in time, within our nuclear family and our immediate surroundings, not much has changed. We're healthy. We are socially distanced. We, at work, we feel very confident in our hygiene and our infectious disease protocols. So when is the right time for us to consider, opening up the nuclear family a little bit more?
And that, to me, I wanted to understand the deaths per day. And to me, when I knew I had clarity that number was dropping, that was going to be, for me, what made me feel a little more comfortable. And also, what kind of risk are we at as a family, and as far as sharing that space? And we have been in contact with my mom, walking around the neighborhood in the backyard at a 6-foot distance, without the kids crawling on her. So, what does that look like as far as them being in an indoor space with someone? I don't know if I'm there yet, but it's an interesting question to answer. And I feel like I don't know what that looks like. And maybe for now, I think we're still waiting to see. I want to see where this deaths per day curve goes, and then before we make that personal decision.
Yeah, and there's different things that I always think about is once again, a public policy facing answer that we can give people versus an individualistic answer, where understanding your own personal circumstances, where you're at, your own personal risk in your family household. Those are very personal decisions that you really have to take a lot of time to think about. And at this point in time, I'm not going to pretend to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing necessarily, given the risks. But we are having that discussion where, things are changing. It's been a month. Once again, everybody has been healthy, and Orange County has been in a level place for now. So it's an ongoing discussion. So I lied earlier. I don't have all the answers, but. Well, actually, I do. That was my answer. My answer is I never have answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then any more questions? That was the big question, I think. Somebody had mentioned before.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other topics? Mental health, we discussed briefly yesterday, Shay.
Yeah.
And I think one of the statements we came up with was, we're all in the same boat, right? So when we're isolated and feeling like this is challenging and frustrating and scary, just one of the things that we had mentioned is just being able to acknowledge that, right? So that this is just a stressful time, and
Yeah, we just kind of want to normalize like the incredible levels of stress that this is causing all of us, even if you feel like maybe for you particularly your day-to-day routine isn't changing that much, or even if I think a lot of us are doing a lot of comparing, like, I don't have it as bad as, no one in my family has been affected yet, I don't have it as bad as some other people. But just on a societal level, I mean, this is just so unprecedented and so uncomfortable, and we've never faced anything like that, and so it's just a lot to take in for all of us, and especially, and then for those of us that have some baseline of kind of hypersensitive nervous systems anyway, or have had some history of anxiety or depression, just know that you're not alone in feeling a little out of whack right now. And our nervous systems, all of us have never dealt with anything like this before. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of a gentle reminder to go easy on yourselves and check in. We hope that for those of you that are struggling, check in with your support network frequently. We hope there's someone you can be honest with about how you're really doing, and not feel like you need to sugarcoat it or say, oh, but I'm so lucky, but it's trying to look at the bright side. We hope there's someone that you're able to share how you're really doing. And for our patients, if you don't have that person, we would love to be that person for you. We need to just give some space to how we're feeling. And that will continue, even once things open back up again. This is where our nervous systems are going to continue dealing with this traumatic event. This is traumatic for all of us. So we want to be here for you, and we hope you let us.
Yeah. And there's a couple more questions before we close it out, or, statements is, agreeing to reopen gradually, but the concern being the thoughts of a second wave, a third wave. Does it make sense to maintain the level as much as possible to reduce the impacts of the second wave? I think it's a good point. I think part of reducing that second and third wave is really just about the resources, being able to selectively open and close things based on the resources to test and to contact trace as best as we can, because those are the tools we have at the end of the day. And following the case count, not only the deaths, that's another comment as well. Cases are actually important. The death rate is kind of the most grave example of what's happening. But clearly, if there's an exponential rise in cases, then clearly the deaths could potentially follow, depending on the true rate of
testing,
mortality, and testing and all that.
I guess for me, the reason I kept talking about deaths rather than cases is because of testing. If there's more testing, there's more cases. Right. And so, and the outcomes that really matter. I mean, hospitalizations, of course, are important too, but are the deaths. So, yeah.
Yeah. 300%. I think that's all the questions for now. That was kind of heavy, but anything else? No. Well, thanks again, guys, for watching. Feel free to tune in. We will do this weekly. Sometimes, clearly, it's Wednesday, sometimes Thursdays, based on
we're trying to do the antibody testing now on Tuesday, Wednesdays.
So.
Oh, and one thing too, Quest and LabCorp Quest is also doing IgG testing, so not IgG and IgM at this point in time. Quest is different to deal with since they are a bigger lab company, so we have less of a white glove experience in terms of dealing with the billing and communication and all that stuff. But they also are backed by just a lot more resources, so there's that heavy that balance between the two. We are open to sending specimens to them. We have not done that yet, but some of you have expressed interest in being able to or wanting to do that. And once again, based on a conversation of the utility and lack of utility of an antibody test in the first place, it really is kind of just helpful in terms of potentially, I should say, in terms of prevalence data in their community rather than actual actionable evidence or actionable information on a personal level. It doesn't change how we do things on a personal level. But if people are interested, we are talking to people individually about that. And so,
yeah, we'll keep communicating the antibody test moving forward for sure.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Till next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.